Hello everyone, my name is Brendan Snyder. Thank you so much for joining me and welcome to another episode about my music collection called Best of the Box. This one focusing on new wave of British heavy metal bands. And so as part of my 11,000 CD, I've got over 97 boxes like those behind me, including this one right here that have 90 CDs in them. And if I take the cover off of it there, you can see inside that it breaks down into 3 rows of 30 apiece, and that's how we've got the 90 CDs in here. And so let me put this back down so I've got a easier way to get into it so that I can go through it with you all. But we take those 97 boxes and we times it by the 90 CDs that are inside. That is 8,730 CDs just within this part of the collection. And so I thought it'd be interesting to take a different box and go through the contents in each one of these episodes. So I'll be doing that, and these boxes can contain anything like whole artist collections, all of one particular genre type, latest purchases, could be collection by a particular record label, but there's a whole different number of things the way these boxes could be broken down. And so this one in particular is going to be a new wave of British heavy metal style box we are going to go through here. But before we dive into that, if you are new to my channel and haven't already hit the subscribe button, please click the button. Also leave a comment, hit like, all those things help support my channel. I would greatly appreciate it. And of course, as an added bonus, by subscribing, you'll be able to stay up to date on all that's going on in the world of music, just like this with a music collection episode, Best of the Box, about the new wave of British heavy metal. So this is actually going to be a part 1 because I've got 2 full boxes like this. This is going to start with the letter A and go through R or go into R, and the other box will also pick up with R and continue through Z. And so I've got my Iron Maiden shirt on because they are probably the most well-known of the new wave of British heavy metal bands. Maybe that except for, say, Def Leppard, but I never really considered them part of it because they kind of rose above that and changed their style considerably from what it once was. But we're going to dive into this here. Also behind me, I've got some other ones, Samson, Saxon, Tygers of Tang, and Tokyo Blade. Those will all be covered in the next issue of this in the part 2, because this is part 1. We aren't going to get to that. But starting with the letter A, I'm going to pull out Angel Witch. And they're probably most well known because Metallica, who brought a lot of new wave of British heavy metal bands recognition, definitely brought them recognition by covering their song Angel Witch. So first album, self-titled, first song, Angel Witch, definitely check it out. Good stuff. If you don't know, this was their second album, and they didn't really catch on. They changed lineup a lot, tried to bring in a vocalist to sing. The guitarist is also the vocalist, but they brought in a vocalist for a short time. Cool live album here on the Metal Blade label, and one of their later era albums here. And then they have gotten back together and or are still together, I guess. And this is one of their newer albums. They put out a brand new one, I think, about a year or so back. And just as good today as they ever were. In fact, I think they're almost better. So I do recommend them. Here's another one. Atomcraft. They really ran under the radar. They're kind of like a hardcore sounding Motorhead, really gruff vocals, but on the hardcore side of things. This label, the Neat Records label, who was a big proponent in signing a lot of these bands back in the day, was bought by Sanctuary Records or Castle Music, and then started re-releasing a lot of this around 2000. And so that's what a lot of this is. It's cool stuff that has been reissued by that label. Here's another one from them, Argon. Good stuff. All of these bands are excellent. Can't say enough about them. If you're into heavy metal and you like the new wave of British heavy metal bands, Iron Maiden, Saxon, Samson, Tygers of Tang, Def Leppard, Motorhead, even Judas Priest, I'd recommend them. Avenger is another cool one. Here's another one of those Neat Records compilations. Gathers up their 2 different albums and releases it, but they've since gotten back together, reunion album. I think they've done even more. A lot of these bands are still just going, and so there's a bunch of stuff. Now here's a band that again, got some notoriety and one of the more well-known bands out of there, Budgie. And this is a really great compilation here. It contains 3 of their MCA albums done in replica style sleeves. Very cool. I've done a full review actually of that box set there. But I've got a bunch more of their stuff. And we're going to start with the most recent, go backwards, this came out in 2006, You're All Living in Cuckoo Land. And then Last Stage, which I think was mostly compilation of stuff, later era, from the last lineup. Deliver Us from Evil, I tended to like the last 3 albums, give or take, that they did. Night Flight is another fantastic one, and this one, Power Supply, always really enjoyed these. But they had kind of modernized their sound to be more like the 80s style metal at the time. But if you want to go back to the classic budgie sound, this one here, If I Were Britannia, I'd Waive the Rules, which is more of that sort of stuff. Live in San Antonio, a good one. And here's another classic, Squawk. So that, along with the Boxset, really good stuff there that, again, I would recommend. And then here's a cool one, Blind Fury. This one here featuring, I believe, who was the original vocalist for, don't recall if it's fuzzy in my head, but he was vocalist with either Satan or Blitzkrieg, and then there's the connection there because the same vocalist who sings for Satan sings for Blitzkrieg, but this guy went on and formed this group over here and sang, so that was a trade-off kind of a thing. And then we've got this one here, a group called Bitches Sin. This is their latest release, and a lot of these groups only put out a couple releases, like this one here, which is a really good album and great album art for that matter, and Invaders back in the day, but then they've gotten back together and done so much more, and or like this, releasing archival material, First Temptation, demos and stuff before the first recording. So a lot of these bands have a lot more out today than they did back then, but that's because they have, the movement's gotten so popular that they can actually go release archival material that they couldn't get record deals for back in the day. So kind of cool. And here's another one that Metallica has made popular, Blitzkrieg. And again, I've got a bunch of their things. So Judge Not was one of their newer ones, Back from Hell. And this band, one of the interesting things was their album art has never been that good. And in particular, it's always kind of been this sort of style here, which is a hand-drawn, sometimes not very good with the perspective or whatnot. But you know what? That's part of what the new wave of British heavy metal was all about. It's something that they took from punk. It was that do-it-yourself attitude, create your own album art, your own graphics, your own t-shirts, your own stage props, things of that nature, and go out and do it. Don't worry about having a record label. Just go do it yourself. And then again, one of those compilations by the Neat Records label, and of course featuring the most well-known song, Blitzkrieg, which is what Metallica has made popular by this band, and so would definitely recommend them for that, if nothing else. Here's a cool one, Chateau. And a lot of these bands, had singles out, and then maybe a couple albums. Some only had singles, and these compilations, gather up a lot of this stuff. And in some cases, because the band only ever had singles, these collections are the only way to get it. So a group called Chariot is another one that came out. These are some of the newer era ones here. And there you go. Cloven Hoof, one that's more on the side of the sort of death metal, not so much in sound, but lyrics and obviously name, Cloven Hoof, that sort of stuff. Now we're going to get into probably the most well-known of the underground new wave of British heavy metal bands, and that's because Metallica has covered 4 of their songs, and so might not immediately be recognizable because of the white cover, but if you could see right there, Diamond Head, their album cover was simply a white cover with the 4 members having signed it, and that's how they originally put out their first album. And of course, Metallica's made the songs The Prince, Am I Evil, It's Electric, Helpless. I think they've done more than that, but those in particular. They then released 2 more albums after that, before I think sort of calling it a day and then getting back together. Again, putting out some archival material with this one, which is really good. Then to try to modernize their sounds, they had this collection come out because Metallica had covered them, and so they remixed those songs and put those out, and that was for a long time the only thing that was in print until the band officially reformed. And then these things, you know, additionally started coming out live albums and best of 2 CD anthology collections. This one here is a direct website release, and then a couple reunion albums. And they've got a latest one out right now. I think it's called Coffin Train. So not everything that I've got is in this box. This is just the stuff I've collected in this particular case right here. Gaskin is another one that has had some notoriety back in the day. Here's a favorite of mine, a group called Fist. Don't really know much about them other than just really good late era 70s hard rock stuff. This album here, but I found them through the compilation that was done by Neat Records, and they have gotten back together and recorded one album together, a newer one, and I have to say the new album is just as good as the original stuff. Here's another band that has a lot of notoriety, probably mostly due to Motorhead giving them a lot of opening slots on their tours, Girlschool. And these first 4 albums by them, a cool little box set of theirs. And got a bunch of other stuff, Guilty of Sin, some of the later era recordings. Hit and Run, one of the early albums re-recorded with modern technology. And here's this one. And then they did this one called Legacy. Cool stuff there with a bunch of cool guests on it. And then this one here, Believe. So they've been around, kicking around for a long time, just continuing to put stuff out. Here's one called Hellenbach, and they were always compared to Van Halen. And while maybe not quite the histrionics on the guitar like Eddie Van Halen does, it does have that sort of crazy guitar flair and everything, and just not what you'd expect from the new wave of British heavy metal. But they got lumped in with it like a lot of bands did that were coming out at that time. And of course, we know that happened with you know, glam rock did that, and other, you know, grunge and other bands and things that didn't really fit in those genres just because they came from those locations. So some of these bands, of course, same thing. So here's a cool one, Holocaust, one of my favorite. And if that name sounds familiar, it's because Metallica covered one of their songs on the Garage Days album, which is The Small Hours. And it actually was only ever available on this live album, Hot Curry and Wine. So even though they only did one studio album, it didn't come from that, it came from the one live album they did. But since that time, they've had different compilations come out. They've reformed and put out a couple new albums. They even broke off at one point, got a different vocalist, I think, changed their name from Holocaust to Hologram. Only came out on vinyl though. So a lot of cool history about these bands too. Here's another one, Jaguar. That's one of the later ones there. So is this one here, but the album cover you might recognize, Power Games. Good stuff, and then some archival material by the band itself. And a lot of these bands have different ties to more famous bands, metal bands that have covered them and so forth. Legend is a pretty cool one. I like this. Definitely more in the vein of the 70s hard rock than the 80s metal sound. Got this one here, group called Martial Law. They were one of the last new wave of British heavy metal bands. I think their album came out in '89, and so they just sort of rode the tail end of it, but they kept putting albums out and stuff, and they're really good, kind of in the vein of Judas Priest, a little different style on the vocals, but good stuff. And then like Samson, this is a band that was an offshoot from it, featuring the vocalist of Samson following Bruce Dickinson, because that album behind us there, Shock Tactics, has Bruce Dickinson on it. But the other vocalists that came out after him, they, together with some other guys, formed this group called Mammoth. And you know, they even had a song called Fat Man, and actually I'll flip some of these over and just show you. All of these guys are big guys here, which is why they chose the name Mammoth. Had nothing to do with their love of Van Halen or anything of that nature, because if you didn't know, Van Halen's original name was Mammoth. Okay, and one of the members in Mammoth is John McCoy, who also played in Gillan, along with Ian Gillan from Deep Purple, and they've done a number of albums as well. And again, archival things that come out and stuff going way back. That's a 1977 album. Here's one of those bands that didn't really sound like the new wave of British heavy metal movement. Nightwing, much more in the new wave, almost melodic rock, kind of like Asia sounding stuff, but they were considered part of it. And then here's another band kind of in that same vein that I like a lot. Gotten a little heavier over the years and definitely more ties to the new wave of British heavy metal movement. But Praying Mantis, this one here being Time Tells No Lies. Really good stuff, but definitely more of the melodic rock. This one's really good. So they only made one album and then broke up, became a whole bunch of different era bands, including Stratus, and having Dennis Stratton in the lineup, and from Iron Maiden and stuff. But this one here, pretty cool. To the Power of 10 that came out, and it had John Gary Barton in the lineup singing lead vocals from Michael Shankar Group. So they've had a bunch of cool vocalists. They even had Paul Di'Anno sing for them from Iron Maiden. As I mentioned, Dennis Stratton played guitar for them. Here's a best of, which I recommend to start with. And then they've been back together for a number of years in the new lineup with the new vocalist. Really, really good. Sort of like Tygers of Tang, having a second wind and a second life to them. So really good stuff. I'd recommend all things by Praying Mantis, just good stuff. Now here's a band that didn't come from that era, but is waving the flag for the new wave of British heavy metal and doing it quite interestingly. Roxcalibur, so I've included them in this box. So what they've done is they are newer guys that are covering new wave of British heavy metal bands, but a lot of them are bands that only ever had one single out. So a lot of this stuff you can't even get a hold of, and if you want some really rare, obscure new wave of British heavy metal stuff, and you don't mind hearing it performed by another performer, because it might be the only way to hear this stuff, Roxcalibur is the way to go. And it's really good quality, done just like it was back in the day, and would highly recommend it. So there you go. That is best of the box, 90 CDs that we just went through covering the new wave of British heavy metal. Again, this is a part 1. There will be a part 2 of this. And certainly let me know your comments, your thoughts. Hopefully you guys enjoyed it. Take care and have a great day. Bye-bye, everyone.